Welcome back to the swamp, my friends, and welcome if you're new. We are going to delve into the darkest corner of YouTube tonight, as always, as we dive into some spine-chilling tales that lurk in the woods. Those creepy, crawly, I think something just touched my leg stories that make you question your life choices, like camping or ever leaving your house again. So, grab those marshmallows, hold your loved ones tight, and get ready for these downright strange in-the-woods horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. If you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode, be sure to submit yours at swampdweller.net or the email that you can find in the description down below. You can also submit it at r/thedarkswamp on Reddit. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into these creepy and downright strange horror stories from the woods that'll freak you out tonight. Traumatized in the Woods by FradulentFlashCards. I spent much time with one set of grandparents in my youth. They watched me while my parents worked all week and kept me all summer at this campground. I had been coming there and staying all summer from the ages of 2 to 13 and have had many fond memories. There is one, however, that has stuck with me over the years. On this particular occasion, I was 6 years old, and my best friend, who was 8 years old at the time, was spending a few days with us at the campground. We only stayed there weekdays since my grandmother worked double shifts all weekend. Therefore, the campground was sparsely populated Monday through Friday, since many people only have off work and camp for weekends or holidays. So there were already eerie vibes there, especially in the darkness, not to mention the ghost stories my dad had told us about the place. Our neighbors in the immediate area were perfect despite barely seeing them. They had a complete outdoor kitchen that I loved playing pretend chef in, and they left it open whenever I wanted and allowed me to play in it. My grandparents were always lovely and easygoing, and my nan was mainly incredibly nurturing to your needs no matter who you were. But they also had moments. Have you ever seen that movie, The Visit? It's kind of reminiscent of that, where it would kind of be like a creepy moment and then kind of go back to normal. My best friend's first day at the campground was when my pop told us to watch out for bears because he had seen one earlier that day. We brushed that off since we had heard things like this all the time, and we were having too much fun riding bikes and going into the creek to really care. Night would soon come, and it would get really dark really fast. My best friend and I are playing in the outdoor kitchen that I mentioned before. Out of nowhere, we hear this low growling and moaning sound, which gets much louder as something begins tearing at the tarp cover, acting as if it was a kitchen wall. We all know that reasoning shuts down the limbic system and overrides during threats of survival. The fight or flight response takes over, if you will. It seemingly happened in an instant. We were running and immediately crying before we could even process what was happening. We run a couple of feet to our camper to get to my nan. I was expecting her to be comforted as she always was, but her reaction to us was somewhat horrifying. She laughs wildly and practically slaps her knees. Baffled and scared, I had no idea how to react to this. My pop emerges behind the camper next to ours, joins the mad laughter, eyes bugging out. So yeah, my pop pretended to be the bear, but he never really admitted to it, it was kind of weird. So he made up that he had seen a bear earlier in the day to scare us, and then I guess when we didn't, get scared by it, he came and physically pretended to be the bear. At least that's my understanding all these years later. We weren't amused, and I don't remember the rest of that week if I'm honest, but I recall still being terrified and finding no relief in their words. I was scared of them and didn't understand why they did that, and I still really don't. I'm all for pranks and kidding around, but I feel like this was a little beyond, especially because they never said explicitly that they, pranked us. They just acted like it didn't happen, but clearly laughed in our faces about it. I don't know. Everything scared me at that age as well. So I'm not acting like this is some crazy traumatic thing, but they had never done anything like this before or after, and I just found it so weird. They did get a kick out of us two kids running away crying and screaming, I can tell you that. They were definitely holding back tears from laughing so hard. Looking back, I felt like it was alarming. They never really apologized or, even paid much mind to the rest of my friend's stay, but they would laugh heartily whenever we brought this up, I don't know. I'll likely never get any further elaboration from them, but, I thought this would be a cool story to share. Campground Killers by BubblyBanana. When I turned 13 years a few years back, I invited about 8 friends to go camping with me. The campsite was near a large forest with giant trees and many bushes, and you can already tell where this is going. The campsite was on the water, so we spent the 2 days there swimming, biking, and exploring the woods nearby. On our first day there, we were biking around to the other campsites when we found a group of kids our age. There were about 3 of them. Instead of getting along, we got into a big argument, which caused a war between our 2 groups. At one point, one of the kids in their group threatened to hurt us with his dad's knife. This made us leave and head back to our campsite, as it had deeply disturbed us and made us uncomfortable. That night was pretty typical. We forgot all about those kids and roasted some s'mores. My mom and dad went to bed at about 10 p.m. They were the only supervisors we had on this trip. They told us not to stay up too late or make too much noise or to leave the campground. As we were messing around, I saw something in the corner of my eye. Honestly, it kind of looked like the shape of a human on a tree line near our campsite. I asked my friends about it and told them to look. We decided to look more closely and try to discern what it was. As we approached, we could tell it was a person. The thing is they weren't moving and they were standing dead still. As my friend, for the sake of this I'll call him Matt, said that he was getting uncomfortable, he wanted to try to get next to the figure. He said that he could tell it was a man for sure. We were all perplexed by this, and were kind of scared and didn't want him to try to go confront whoever or whatever this was. My first thought was honestly like, why would anyone put a mannequin out here? I'm trying to figure out some sort of rational reason as to why this person, figure, thing would be standing there so still without making a single noise or movement. As we tried to figure out the answer, we began to hear movement around us, coming from the nearby bushes. We decided to dash back to camp, and once we all made it, we got into our tent and kept watching to see if anyone was coming. There was a point where my friend Brody saw a figure in the tree line moving. I caught a glimpse of it as well, but I'm unsure if it was a person or what it was. We kept taking shifts of sleeping and watching for people. We were tired the following day and decided to check out the dummy. We wanted to see what it was. We saw it gone without a trace as we approached the area. This also disturbed us, as it was about 5 in the morning, meaning someone must have come and taken it very early. We went back to check on the kids we fought with and saw that they were still there. When they saw us coming, they quickly went into their camper and hid. We tried to wait for them, but they wouldn't come out no matter what. Eventually, we gave up and headed back to our site. It was still relatively early. We decided to keep exploring where Brody may have seen a person. What we found next made us all want to leave and never return. In a bush, right next to where Brody saw the figure, was a hunting knife, a pair of binoculars, and a hunting rifle. We assume it was those kids, but how did they get those items if it was? Honestly, the oldest kid was maybe 11 years old. The night was pretty normal again until about midnight. We saw more movement in the trees and we knew we had to be careful. We all stayed up and watched as multiple figures made their way through the trees. Eventually, I'm assuming that Matt got mad and decided to open the tent, shine his flashlight, and start yelling at whoever was out there. We followed him as he moved closer to the trees and saw there were 2 kids booking it deeper into the woods carrying the items we had found in the bush. After we scared them off, we returned to the tent and the rest of the night was uneventful. Although none of us could sleep that night, and how could we? Nothing more happened, as by the time we checked on the kids the next day, they had already left the campsite with their family. That experience honestly still haunts me, and I wonder what would have happened if we had been vulnerable in those woods that night. I mean, they had a gun and we had a tent. At the end of the day, if they really wanted to do something, they could have, and I think that's what bothers me sometimes. Someone is Stalking My Land by BluntenSmoke. To give a little backstory, I honestly tend to keep to myself. Except, I have to share this story, because something out of the ordinary is happening to me. I live where it's uncommon to see wanderers or any sort of travelers. I barely see anyone, except for the occasional funeral of an old friend. I like to consider it a safe and peaceful area to rest. However, some occurrences within the past few weeks have made me think otherwise. It all started about a week ago, one warm evening as I was relaxing at home, watching the day go by and listening to the creatures sing their song of nature in the beautiful wooded country I live in. Suddenly, all went quiet. There was not a single bird chirping or a frog croaking. Something felt wrong. I tuned in to see if I could hear or see anything out of the ordinary, straining my ears to its fullest, but to my dismay, everything looked and sounded normal. It was just quiet. I know this doesn't sound off to some of you listening. However, this was just wrong for where I live. There was always noises of nature, always noises of something, whether it be the wind, the bugs, the dirt, even the grass. A few days had passed, and all was normal until I had just finished cooking dinner and went up to rest for the evening. I was looking out and listening to the song of nature again, and suddenly, you guessed it, absolutely everything went dead silent. I almost brushed it off at this time again, but I started considering maybe it was some sort of predator. And there can be bears and such in the area from time to time, so I wasn't too worried. Once again, as I listened closely, trying to tune in to the nature around me, it was eerily silent, almost unbearable, if you will. That was until I heard it. It was a distant chattering sound. I sat and focused for a minute, trying to see if I could pinpoint where it was coming from. Honestly, it sounded like it was coming from everywhere. I waited through another few seconds of silence, and that's when I began to hear leaves crunching like something massive was moving. Living in the country, you can tell the difference between humans, animals, and anything else walking in the woods. This was definitely some sort of human, or at least a bipedal creature. I felt a strike of fear go through me as I nested down and tried to get out of sight. Now, my house is not very assuming, it's built into the woods, can't really notice it unless you pop up upon it, I noticed after some time that he came up onto my house, and I noticed he was wearing a strange outfit. It honestly looked like some sort of homemade ghillie suit, like he was trying not to be heard. The chattering stopped, and I noticed whatever this person was doing was making the noise with their teeth. So they were chattering their teeth essentially, which sounds honestly awful. I began to hear a banging sound, and I wasn't really sure what they were doing, but it looked like whatever they had in their hands, they were banging against a tree. I began to kind of squeal in slight fear. As I said, I'm pretty introverted. I'm not really like a super tough guy. I can take care of myself and survive off the land, but confrontation with people is not something I've ever really been that good at. Eventually, they got closer, and I noticed what was in their hand was actually some sort of machete/spear type thing. Honestly, it looked like he had a PVC pipe that he had spray painted and somehow mounted a machete on it. It was pretty janky looking, if I'm honest. This guy noticed me and started shouting at me and doing more of those loud chatters with his teeth. At this point, I began to black out, absolutely terrified. I thought of all the funerals I've attended, all the fallen friends and acquaintances that I have unfortunately had to see over the years, the ones who didn't make it to live the life that I got to live, and in that moment, I decided that I wasn't going to end up quite there. This was not going to be my fate, and today was not going to be my funeral. This guy started charging at me, chattering his teeth, sounding like some sort of alien from a movie. He swung his spear machete thing at me, and it skinned my leg slightly as I was moving out of the way. I honestly was kind of in shock. I had no idea why this person would be charging me or trying to take my life like this. Honestly, all I had was a small .22. I had a .380 somewhere else in the house, but I believe it was broken or jammed. There was something wrong with it and I couldn't figure it out. But my .22 worked just fine. Now, it wasn't ideal. It wasn't going to pack the most powerful punch, but if it bleeds, it dies. So I picked up my .22 that I had laying next to my chair outside, and I just unloaded. Luckily, it seemed like I scared him more than I may have hurt him, because the moment he saw me aiming a gun at him, he began to run. I'm not the type of person that's just going to scatter them with a bunch of bullets, though. I let off a couple shots, intentionally missing them, watching them run in terror away, making a more alarming and distressed chattering sound. The Georgia Foothills Are Strange by Inner Lab 123. There is a strange old energy throughout the Georgia Piedmont and the foothills of the Appalachians. The area's geography, that which has not yet been consumed by Atlanta's limitless growth, is characterized by dense forest, rolling hills, and shallow red clay valleys punctuated by soft grassy meadows. Silty rivers and small streams crisscross the landscape, often filling the valleys to form leaks and marshes. We are never alone in this forest, not truly, which are densely populated with wildlife of all strata. The region also hosts a sizable human presence, with booming sun-belt suburbs sprawling endlessly into the ancient hills. As so many people are in a relatively small region, it can feel difficult to escape the hustle and bustle. Well-known trails close to population centers are often crowded, especially on fall weekends when the plentiful trees bloom with autumn color. I've been around long enough to know what hikes to avoid at certain times of year, as solitude is one of the most enticing benefits of the wilderness to me. Plenty of state and natural forest and expansive county nature preserves through the tall grass and down the hill toward the grove at the bottom of the meadow. My pup and I were drawn to the urgency to this off-trail area of the preserve, and soon enough, we were at the trees, taking our first steps into the dim woods. Through the branches ahead, I could see a crumbling red brick chimney standing alone in the brush. It did not appear far away, but as we continued advancing toward it, it took several minutes. It seemed we weren't getting any closer. Suddenly, a giant black snake stopped us in our tracks, positioning itself as if to block us from going any more forward. This is highly unusual behavior for black snakes and just snakes in general, which are normally furtive and keep away from people. This slight shock snapped me out of almost a trance-like state, and suddenly, everything felt wrong. I took it as a sign that we were not welcome in this part of the forest, and no longer wanted to investigate the chimney. It took much longer than expected to get back to the meadow. At this point, I was drenched in sweat and my pup was panting hard, whereas not long ago, we had been enjoying a relatively fantastic summer evening. The meadow was also dark, and when I checked my watch, I saw what we had been off trail for nearly an hour. Everything was silent, no more cicada chirping. I have had similar encounters throughout the region where the laws of space and time seem to be somehow suspended in certain areas of the backwoods. I've considered looking for the chimney again when I have more daylight and time to work with. But then I think about the snake's warning and the feeling of existential dread that I felt that evening. Perhaps some things are not meant to be investigated. I don't know how to express this other than it was lost time and maybe some sort of strange missing 411 type vibe. I would love to know your opinions in the comments. Thanks for listening to these creepy and downright strange in-the-woods horror stories that'll freak you out tonight. As always, if you have a story that you would like to share in a future episode and potentially hear it narrated, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. You can also submit these stories via Reddit at r/thedarkswamp. If you haven't yet, be sure to hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. The more likes this video gets, the more YouTube promotes it in the algorithm, and that's incredibly helpful to the swamp growing. If you're new to the swamp, why not join us? Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new episode, as I upload them multiple times a week on all things natural and supernatural. If you would be so kind as to leave a comment down below letting me know what story was your favorite or just how your day is going, I would love to start some conversations with you all. Thank you guys so much for supporting the swamp the way you do. Don't forget to join me over on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, Instagram, all the fun social medias. Just type in Swamp Dweller, you'll find me, I'm there. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you all soon with some more creepy videos.